Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I know that you all have had a wonderful Trans Day of Visibility. I know we've been holding it down all across the lands, all over the globe, and of course, all over the interwebs. I've seen so many beautiful family members, sisters, brothers, siblings, and it is such a joy that even in a time where we're seeing continued and increased attacks on our community, our people always know how to show up with power and brilliance. I am going to be your host tonight for this amazing power building, solidarity stirring, legacy loving ride that we're calling Building Power and Solidarity Across Generations. I'm Raquel Willis, writer, activist, and a proud co founder of Gender Liberation Movement. And I am just one of the many, many voices that you will be hearing tonight. We have pretty much every powerhouse organization and group that you can think of across our community coming together to give you a whole bunch of sustenance. So this is not just going to be another webinar. This is a bit of a family reunion. It's going to give you some healing because we all know we need some healing right now. And it's also going to have a lot of strategy baked in because the people that you're going to hear from are experts in showing up for not only themselves, but showing up for our community. And we know that on Trans Day of Visibility, it is not enough for us to be seen. We know that visibility is a very complicated concept. We know it's given us a lot of great things. We have some superstars on our screens, on the covers of magazines. We have people on hit songs and albums like Renaissance, which we listened to as we got ready for this conversation. But we also know that we have to continue to fight for vitality. We have to continue to fight to shift the material conditions that are going to keep our people safe, resourced, honored, and free. So we are going to continue to defy any hateful leadership out there. We're going to continue to pour into our own trans, non-binary, intersex, gender expansive, and queer leaders and our own power. And we're going to use that to continue to build the world that our ancestors and transcestors dreamed of, the one that we deserve, and of course, the one that all of our descendants and transcendents deserve. And we're going to do what we're always called to do in these moments. We're going to resist, we're going to be radically defiant, and we're going to make sure that we love our trans and non binary and gender expansive power more than anybody could try and snuff it out. So, we're going to hop into our first amazing speaker. This is someone who embodies movement legacy with every action that they take. Candy Brings Plenty is Oglala Lakota, is two-spirit, queer, non-binary, and an unapologetic force for Indigenous and trans liberation. They're part of Transgender Law Center's Trans Agenda for Liberation Coalition and the first ever ACLU Indigenous Justice Organizer for the Dakotas and Wyoming. So let's give it up for the iconic, the powerful, and the revolutionary Candy Brings Plenty.
Hemetakiapi. Lampe tukile I ohachante waste nape chuziapie. Imachiapi wakia tuampi ioyampawi. Imachiapi chante makilawi. I would like to greet each and every one of you with a handshake from my heart. I am coming from the Ocheti Shakoi, the mini Luzaha Chesapa territories, which is located here in the Black Hills in South Dakota, and I come from the Pine Ridge Reservation. I would just like to ask each and every one of us to take a moment to acknowledge the ancestral lands that we are standing on, where we are embracing our home, our full authentic selves, and acknowledge the success that was built on the shoulders of my ancestors, built by stolen people on stolen lands. So with that said, I'm here, I stated, to acknowledge Oceti Sakowin territories, and I'm really grateful beyond just having a day of visibility, but having a home in my own body and having a spiritual experience in this human body. So, for me, I want to also identify that I walk with my spiritual armor. And right now, today, that looks like walking with our ancestral identity in everything that we do, regardless of the indigenous lands that we all come from, because we all come from ancestral lands. I want us to walk forward with that. I would like us to just take one moment here. I'm going to close my eyes and give us that moment to be visible within and be visible throughout and be visible authentically on these lands that we're standing on. So with that moment, I'm going to take a big deep breath and be thankful for that. Wopilatanka. In my culture, my language, I'm Oglala Lakota Sioux from the Pine Ridge Reservation. I identify as a transgender, non-binary two-spirit, and I am just so excited to be a part of the Transgender Law Center's National Coalition. I believe I'm going on my third year here, almost four, and I'm super excited to feel my own growth and acknowledgement of family throughout what that looks like. And I know that the work that I've been doing with the Transgender Law Center on the National Coalition has built a narrative through experience, through the pain and beauty of growing as a voice that is unapologetically me, unapologetically the full authentic power that we walk with every time we come into a room and we get to be proud of who we are. And that's something that I've been able to embrace beyond my own community, beyond just being a two-spirit activist, beyond being a land protector and a land defender. I've been able to put that all together and really identify with the trans agenda that we've been working on as the National Coalition. One of the pillars that I personally have been a part of is the beloved home pillar in this work that we've been doing. And I'm not gonna lie, as an indigenous Oglala Lakota Sioux, I kind of have this tunnel vision, and I do know rightfully I do have the ability to call that in, because I can trace my ancestors back 7 generations. I can translate my own experience in my Lakota language and call the fact that us two spirits, us transgender and non-binary people have been on Turtle Island since before first contact. We have been here since before 1492. And when I stand in front of my tribal council, elevating, activating, and empowering these elders who are still saturated in historical trauma from the boarding school era, I remind them with the words I was taught, Hechiama Trumpi. That means I came from the other side this way. I came from the Star Nation as this being, as the spiritual power within this human home that I'm walking in. And so, it's been an amazing journey because I have learned that I have these siblings now who are islanders. I have these siblings who come from extensions of what I've known as Turtle Island. Turtle Island to me has been, the land that is First Nation relatives up in Canada and Alaska. the tribal nations of the United States and Mexico. That in itself is physically a turtle, which is why we call it Turtle Island. And then we have our relatives who are continuing beyond that in North America, in the extended islands, in our relative Oyate. And like I was saying, I have been guilty of only looking with this vision of being a two-spirit trans non-binary person, but I got to understand and embrace the love of all the many cultures, all the other walks of life on Turtle Island who share the exact same sentiment of this is us and we belong here. We have been here. And that's something I want to embrace and share in this work that I've been doing with the Transgender Law Center, where we are calling out that environmental justice is also trans justice. It's also stating that we deserve to be housed and happy. We deserve to have clean water and healthy food. We deserve to the human rights of having a home environment that is constitutional. We deserve all of the constitutional rights. And, I don't know if I can say this, but often I start my speaking with fuck Donald Trump. And that's what I wanted to start with today. But, I want to acknowledge the land before anything else because I'm Oglala Lakota Sioux. I'm two-spirit, non-binary, transgender before anything else, before I even open my eyes, when I take my first breath. And, I just really want to acknowledge that we are a powerhouse. Even in this Zoom today, even in this gathering, we are standing here in this magnetic power that draws us to one another, as well as inviting our ancestors to lead that way. These transcestors who came before us before first contact. Like I was saying, I have very much been a linguistic advocate because it is within the words that we use. And I was able to pass tribal law stating in over the 580 recognized tribes in the United States alone, each of these tribes has their own languages. And we have words that is our oral tradition that archives that trans people have been here since before first contact. So, this colonial construct, I hope it does collapse because we were here before and we will be here after. Wopila Tonka, thank you.
Wow. I mean, come on, Candy Brings Plenty. You live up to your name. Thank you so much for bringing so much fire already into the space and for introducing, I'm sure, for many folks, this concept of beloved home and what that means. I definitely think on this day, Trans Day of Visibility, one of the things we often talk about or are forced to talk about, right, as trans and gender expansive folks, are our bodies, right, and what it means to affirm in all of the ways that we exist. And you can't talk about affirmation without also talking about how we affirm the earth, affirm the world that we live in. So thank you so much for bringing us into formation. All right, so we're going to keep the fire rolling. Next up, we have someone who is going to remind us all that you're not truly intersectional if you're not elevating intersex power. And I'm talking about Erica Lorsbaugh, a queer, intersex, and genderqueer civil rights attorney and executive director of Interact. And Erica is fighting for intersex youth and advancing the rights of all people with intersex traits with brilliance and boldness. You're going to hear it now. Welcome, Erica.
Raquel, thank you. And I'm just so happy to be with you all today when our visibility feels more important than ever. But, you know, Uh, I'm here to remind us all that we can't be silenced or erased, and our existence and our resilience and our joy and our demands for justice and for our full and vibrant humanity to be acknowledged, these cannot be ignored. You know, although intersex and gender identity are different, trans and intersex folks have been in solidarity for generations, and our communities share many of the same struggles, and they can also overlap. Lots of folks like myself are both intersex and trans. Um, Trans and intersex communities have also been historically intertwined in their fight for justice. You know, the US movement for intersex rights and for the bodily autonomy of intersex kids took shape and first took to the streets with the support of trans activists. You know, many organizations that were founded in that period and many since have used the TGI acronym, you know, trans and gender expansive or gender nonconforming and intersex, to kind of reflect the power of our shared visibility and the shared need to advance the rights of all people whose authentic existences defy these stereotypical expectations of sex and gender. And so, you know, we all come with different levels of experience and learning. And so I just want to, you know, share for folks who may not know, intersex is just a broad term for many different innate variations in a person's sex characteristics. These could be characteristics in their genitals, in their chromosomes, in their hormones, their internal anatomy, that simply may not match what's thought of as being typically male or typically female. Now, these differences in a person's sex characteristics are often identified at birth, but not always, and some variations may not be apparent until puberty or later in life. Some intersex people can live their whole lives without being aware of their intersex traits, especially those who are denied their right to bodily autonomy and subjected to non-consensual surgeries in infancy in an attempt to erase or change their differences. You know, our ancestors who took to the streets together, though, they knew that the goals and the demands of the intersex community and the trans community were one and the same. They knew that this was about the fundamental human right to make our own choices about our own bodies, the right to say for ourselves who we are and live our lives authentically, and the right to do all of that without fear of violence, discrimination, and inhumane treatment just for being who we are. Many folks don't know, but the harmful anti-trans laws and policies that are taking root almost always impact intersex people as well, because they rely on these regressive and narrow definitions of sex that are designed entirely to enforce outdated and unscientific, perfectly binary stereotypes of sex and gender. When they're applied as law, these definitions lead to incredibly absurd and incredibly harmful outcomes for many intersex people whose bodies, by definition, don't fit into these perfectly binary boxes. And on the flip side, many efforts over the years to advance affirmative LGBTQ rights and protections have not included intersex people until more recently. And this is a needless barrier to justice that the trans community has endured for far too long as well. The impacts on all of us of these hateful policies are making havoc right now across so many different areas of our lives, at work and in schools and in healthcare settings, in the forming of our families and how we walk the world each day. We're forced to just stand up for our right to exist, for the simple basics of this promise, the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But the core matter of this struggle is about the fundamental right to autonomy, that our bodies belong to us, who we are belongs to us, and there is no authority greater than ourselves about what we need in order to survive and thrive. Intersex activists stand united with our trans siblings and with the broader LGBTQIA+ movement, as well as the movements for health equity, reproductive justice, and gender justice more broadly. And I will say they can try to target us one by one, but when we link arms in solidarity and we move together, we're a force that can't be denied. I'm really proud to be here and to stand with you all today. And I want to invite you to visit our website to learn more about trans intersex solidarity and to become a part of the fight for intersex bodily autonomy and justice. You can visit the Get Involved page of Interact's website, interactadvocates.org/get-involved, where you can find tools and resources, and please sign up for our advocacy updates and action alerts. By raising our voices together with our allies and those who love us, we all just killed anti-trans and intersex legislation in the Senate a few weeks ago. That's in this environment. The noise is loud, but when we speak up, we have the power to make a difference. So much solidarity with you all, and really thank you for being here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Erica. You killed it. And, as you were talking, I was thinking of this quote from Tre'vell Anderson, who is an amazing author and thinker, who talks about being non-binary, not living in the standard blue or the pink, but in the lavender expanses of life. And I think that that's such an apt metaphor for the intersex experience. And so I just appreciate you for making all the connections you just did. All right, so we are going to have our first conversation for the night. They got your girl working, but I am so glad to be in conversation with our next iconic leader. If you don't already know Mari Turner, your queer political education might be missing a few lessons. Mari is the current director of digital organizing and communications at Freedom, Oklahoma, and former state rep for Oklahoma's 88th House District. They like building better and translating policy when they're not baking with their nephew. So I love that little tidbit. I have some amazing nibbling, so we can kiki over that too. But welcome. How are you today?
Hi, salams. I'm doing well, doing well. And if anybody out there who has just observed Ramadan, want to say Eid Mubarak to you. But I'm doing well, doing well. How are you?
Yes, Eid Mubarak to you. I am doing well. I mean, I think this was a beautiful Tov. I've just had my spirit elevated all day, which, we need these days, right about now. So we're going to talk a bit about how care is our legacy. And I want to talk to you because you're someone who has done work on behalf of our communities on the margins from so many different vantage points. And so I'm curious about your perspective on what activists can do to make sure state lawmakers pay attention to their issues.
That's a really good question. I think a couple of things, right? Like as an individual, but also organizationally, we are trying to figure out what that narrative shift looks like for us, right? From doing so much policy focused work and not saying that we don't watch policy, we watch policy fervently. But one of the biggest things I think organizers, activists, community members can do, right, is to show folks that have political power is that we're going to continue to show up for each other anyway, right? That we're going to continue to provide resources for each other anyway, because they don't care. They have shown us, right, that they don't care about rules, or power build or governing, right? Ethically or with a community care standpoint. And so I think it is really, really important to make sure that we are staying in our communities and we are providing resources. We are doing the mutual aid, right? Like we are talking to folks because it's not just about the policy, but it's about how we survive it too, right? And that includes joy and community. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think just listening to you over the years and following your work, I appreciated how you always kind of connected back to the needs of your constituents, but also having your door open to those grassroots organizers. Because I know, sometimes even for me, I'm like, oh, forget these lawmakers. Like they're all getting on our nerves because we often just hear about, the ones who are doing the messy stuff. But there are ones that are built differently, like you have been in your career, who really see all the sides and keep that door open. So I want to thank you for setting that example. Um, we're going to get a little personal, if that's okay. Um, you are also a parent. And of course, you have young people in your life. So, can you talk about the joys and the challenges of being a parent who lives so boldly and authentically as yourself, but also just being someone who is an adult that has youth in your life that you're trying to set an example for?
Ugh, yeah, I think I would be lying if I said it wasn't a scary time, especially in a place like Oklahoma. I think the nation hears about our state superintendent of public education all the time. And raising a young Black child in Oklahoma's public education system it's scary. And so I'm thankful that I'm able to have a relationship with educators, but it's all like with the educators at our schools, and that's so important. But the reality also is, right, is that like I'm not only trying to set a good example, but I'm trying to make sure I'm creating a place where my little one feels like they don't have to leave in order to survive, right? I say what you will about Oklahoma from the outside in, but I love this place. This is where I found out who I was as a Black trans queer Muslim growing up in the buckle of the Bible Belt. And I don't want to lose my state to fascist or authoritarian rule. So I'm going to be here fighting as long as I can. And I want to make sure that I am being an outward, not only an inward example of that, but an outward example of that for my nibblings, for my siblings, and for anybody else who's like, I don't know if I can stay here for whatever reason, right? But it's scary if you are a parent in public education, if you are a guardian in public education, and I am right there with you. And it means that we get to take bold steps together to make sure that we are taking care of each other. So
Yeah, thank you so much. And, I think with that, we have to give so much love to folks in Oklahoma, in the Bible Belt, in the Midwest, in the
yeah,
South where I'm from. I'm a Georgia peach, honey. So
yeah.
shout out to all the folks in those areas and also just rural areas, right? I think that, we don't talk enough about the different experiences in those locations, and how there are a lot of barriers to finding ourselves, but also finding community. So thank you for bringing that into the space. And I want to ask one last question. This was not pre-approved, so just roll with me. But I know that you like to bake with your nephew. Do y'all have a favorite thing that you like to bake?
Oh my gosh, right now, he loves to bake pizza. Like he likes to do the pizza
Oh,
dough and then bake the pizza. So that's a big kick. Lately, though, this past week, we've been baking a lot of cookies, sugar cookies, oatmeal chocolate chip, regular chocolate chip. He's been on a cookie one lately. Yeah.
okay. So we have about 400 and something folks on the call who just heard that y'all know how to throw down in the kitchen. So just be prepared when folks are in the Oklahoma area. I know they're going to look you up.
Look, that's the Oklahoma Community Care. That's the Oklahoma standard I'm pushing. So if you want some cookies, let me know.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your insight and just all of your levity, your everything.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right. So we're going to keep this love fest going. Next, we have someone who's going to let you know that the youth are not just all right, but they're organizing their own proms, honey. They are speaking truth to power, and they are leading right alongside us moldy old adults. I'm proud to announce a young person that I absolutely cherish as one of my chosen nibblings, Daniel Trujillo, a 17-year-old Chicano trailblazer from Tucson, Arizona, one of the organizers of Trans Prom, and a fierce advocate for youth justice. Make some noise for Daniel.
Hey y'all. When going through some of the questions on the little document that all the organizers of this really cool event gave us, one of the questions was what was the hope for our future, and what do youth want to see now, and what does like a perfect future for trans youth look like? And I think I want to preface this by saying I have a really different experience. I came out when I was 8 years old, and my parents were super supportive right off the bat, and they did all these amazing things to help curate safe spaces for me. They went to my school. They went to my principal. They went to my school. and they made sure that I had the right to use the correct bathroom, that my teachers were using the correct name and pronouns, that when kids said something, I don't know, when kids were saying something transphobic, then it was handled. They went to my family, went to my tias, to my tios, and they told them about if they just told them blatantly, like, you're either in or you're out, and we're gonna love and support our child. And so I have been grateful and lucky enough to have this amazing structure around this amazing support around me. But I think we see glimpses of a perfect future every day. And I think it's really important that in this moment we don't forget that. Like Raquel Willis was saying, that I'm one of the 4 organizers of Trans Prom, which was a national rally and a prom that we did on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. And we got around 150 other people there. And it was just a place for trans youth to feel loved and supported and feel safe in their bodies and feel safe in whatever they wanted to wear. And honestly, it was a bit spiteful too, because it was at the National Mall and we marched to the Supreme Court. We were like, we're going to throw party rats at your office window. You guys are not invited. And it was really amazing. And I think moments like that, or even when you go to the salon or the barber and you get that really amazing haircut, or you go to your grandpa and your parent or your grandparents' house and they support you and they love you, or maybe you're walking down the street and you hold the door for some like old person and they're like they use the correct pronouns on you. I think that's a world we see, and we see a lot of joy all the time. I think what has really made the difference for me though is that my parents were so supportive, and they really did a lot of effort to make spaces safe for me. They did a lot of work that for me feels like the bare minimum now. And what is really important in this moment is that we have people like my parents, we have our cis allies, our cis queer allies helping us in this moment. And I think it's also really important that for us trans folk that we remember that we see an amazing future like all the time. I also think that we need to remember to be in community with each other. It's really amazing that through my activism, I've been able to build this family across the country and across the world. And it's really amazing that I just have like cousin in this state and an aunt in this state, you know, and just being able to be in support with each other and be in community with each other, especially during this administration where we're feeling a lot of pushback on our own identities and all these things. And I think my main thing is that I just want people to know that we're in the right path, or we're making the right choices, and we're getting to this place of a perfect future for trans youth. And we know what it looks like. We know what it feels like. It feels like a place where, or a perfect future for trans youth is where trans youth can get adequate medical care if they want to, where their parents support them, where it's not just an option that your kid is trans, but it's a hope. And that's a Jules Gill Peterson quote that my mom quotes all the time. That's another reason why she's the GOAT, or why she's so awesome. Sorry. But thank you.
Awesome. Daniel, I feel like you thought we didn't know what the GOAT meant. We know what that meant. We coined it, but it's okay. Daniel is amazing, and I just want to shout out a little bit about Daniel's role in the Freedom to Be campaign that ACLU is spearheading, and a lot of us in different organizations and groups have been a part of. He is one of the featured people, one of the featured leaders in that campaign that's doing a lot of work ahead of the US v. Skermeti case. So I want to give a shout out to the ways that he shares his voice and his story and his power on so many different platforms. Okay, so we have a few more speakers and then we have one more conversation. So just giving you a heads up, stay in there with us. Our next person is someone who has fought for marriage equality, who has been building trans power in New England since the early 2010s. So they have been in the trenches on so many fights. She is the executive director of Equality Maine, Gia Drew.
Oh, thank you so much, Raquel. And it's so wonderful to be with all of you tonight on Transgender Day of Visibility. I'm Gia, she, her. And, the first thing I want to just say, thanks to Candy Briggs Plenty, is just to acknowledge where we are here in Maine on Dawn lands of the Wabanaki peoples. And I think it's really important to recognize that as we talk about our growing intersectional movement. And it's, not lost on me on the heritage here in Equality Maine and what I inherited 13 years ago when I joined Equality Maine, around how much of our work used to be so siloed to the detriment of our full community. And we're trying so hard to make sure we're building relationships with all sorts of people, so we can survive, and we can only depend on each other. And I think it's really important that we continue to recognize our relationships with all sorts of people, especially on days like today. You mentioned earlier about the complex nature of visibility, and I was reminded very quickly, 40 years ago when I was attacked as a teenager in high school for being me, and again this morning on social media for being me. What I've learned over those 40 years is I can't control anybody else's feelings or emotions about who I am. I love myself, and I believe in that. And I think that is the strength that I bring to this work. And I think all of you probably do too, is when we learn to love ourselves, we can face so much more. And when we're together, we can face even more. And I think that's the place we're in right now, especially here in my home state of Maine, where we've become, unfortunately, sort of the target zero of the ire of the current president and the federal government. It seems like every day there's a new attack on our beautiful trans community here in Maine, especially people and families in schools, and teachers, and doctors who love transgender people. And it's been relentless. But I will say, in this time, our community has galvanized. Our trans community is leaning into one another, not giving up on one another, not feeling guilty about feeling joy. We don't know when this will all end, and maybe it'll never end, but we know that our community is our superpower, and that we will get through whatever comes at us as long as we are with one another. And as people have mentioned, that we need to support one another, learn from one another, step back and take breaks when we need to. And we're stronger when we do that. One of the other things I've been thinking about, especially today on Transgender Day of Visibility, is our legacy as an organization. And while we've been around for 40 years, and I've been here for about 13 years and been the director for about 3. Every day is a learning experience. And I'm very humble that I come into work or I'm somewhere else and I'm constantly learning about how people talk about themselves or how they present themselves and what is safe for them and what is not safe for them. And I think what I've inherited is a really wonderful grassroots organization that has people on the ground in virtually every county in the state. And so I know that we have the strength, I hope, to weather this current storm. But I know nationally it's going to be really hard. And I think it's going to take all of us continually to check in with one another, learn from one another, learn how to sit back and listen, learn how to raise our voices, but also how do we empower our allies to really engage in what's important right now. And I think that's a challenge for me here in Maine and across the country, is how do we make sure that trans folks can live their lives the way they want to live, but how can we engage other people in this fight? Because it's real, it's very scary for a lot of people, but I know there's some allies sitting out right now that don't know how to get involved. They're afraid of saying the wrong thing. And I think that's important for all of us, is to find pathways and bridges to bring more allies into this conversation as we continue to fight for the rights of transgender people across this country and these lands. Here in Maine, we have 3 different trans-led organizations. So if you want to get involved in support of the work going on here, I think someone's probably going to share those links for Outright Portland or Maine Transgender Network, or Equality Maine. Thank you for being here tonight to celebrate Transgender Day of Visibility and celebrating transgender people all over these lands. It's so special to be here tonight. Thank you again. Thanks, Raquel, and everyone else.
Thank you so much, Gia. And thank you for reminding us that sometimes we are fighting invisible before we even want to be or are trying to be. So shout out to all the folks who have just been visible throughout their lives, right? Just simply have been too fabulous to go unacknowledged. And thank you, Gia, for all the work that you do. So we are going to go to our next speaker, another visionary rooted in resilience. We have Victoria Castro, who is the founder of T4T Empowerment desde un corazón trans. And she is an immigrant trans woman, a survivor, and a fighter who uplifts our trans migrant siblings every single day. Bienvenida, Victoria.
Hola, hola, gracias, gracias.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Rachel. Thank you, folks, for being here, folks online. I am so honored and privileged that I'm here today with spectacular, beautiful trans people doing wonderful work towards visibility and liberation of our trans communities and immigrant communities. Thank you so much. I am so happy. And well, definitely to me as an abolitionist trans woman is very, very important to really center liberation and fundamentally support trans immigrant folks. That, you know, we need to be a people who live in autonomy and freedom. And personally, I believe that our gender expression and our identities should not be jailed. And that is why, as a survivor who is trans and immigrant, I do not want to allow to, you know, let the system draw me back to the shadows. And a lot of our trans sisters also talk about it. We will not allow any asshole to return us to the shadows. And it is so important to me to say that we are resilient people. And that is what really makes us be who we are. We have resisted a lot. We have survived through a lot. We have been in the struggle. A lot of us have gone through a lot of things. So it's very important to me to invite people to support the movement for liberation, because together we are stronger. So we let's not let people who are trying to kill us, who are persecuting us, to, you know, we are not going to allow them to draw us back to the shadows. So it's very important to really see that when we are together, we can do a lot. And this is why it's very, very, very important to me to say that those attacks to the trans and immigrant communities, we are so intertwined. And it is very important to keep saying that we are in the same struggles, because we are being persecuted by the system and people specifically that are trying to kill us and deny us fundamental services that we deserve and we have the right to, because we are human beings, and that's very important. So to me personally, I am scared every day, but I take that fear to be more empowered and to empower my communities, because it is very important to educate and also to become engaged with the movements that are visibilizing our communities, and for everybody to have the same possibility to fight for the rights that they're trying to take away from us and that are ours, because we are humans. It doesn't matter if you're trans, it doesn't matter if you are an immigrant. We have to be together. and the rights are yours. And that's very important. Also, I know there's a lot of people connected today that you will watch the video after, and also maybe folks that at some point you sit and then you think, how can I support trans people? How can I support trans immigrant folks? First of all, raise your voice, support the movements, and also join the organizations and share your resources. That is so important that we do this. And also to mention, get involved. And you don't have to be a trans person, you don't have to be an immigrant person to become involved. And number two, if you are a trans person and if you are not an immigrant person and if you have a regular immigration status, do not be or do not go too far from the movement. I know that for a lot of us, we are able to feel safer because we have status, right? But like, don't go too far. Stay involved and let's support each other and let's stick together in the fight, because if we are all divided and in silos, that is not going to go anywhere. So let's be together and let's all be involved so we can share this truly wonderful power that we have in different movements and different areas of life, so we can help our communities. It is also very important to support each other. And how are we going to do that? In collective struggle, like I said. So me personally, I am in constant communication with a lot of trans leaders and people who are involved in the movement. And I firmly believe that communication among ourselves right now is very critical, because we are able to redirect trans folks that for some reason, maybe we don't know where the information is, where we can find a safe place, a safe spot, or a safe home where we feel supported. So it's very important that folks, like me, who got to this country without speaking the language, and that is limiting. How can we direct our communities that are scared? So it's very important for me to talk about all of this. And I also want to say, folks who are here and are visible, we will continue fighting, and we are not going to allow anybody to erase our history, because we want to build a better world for everybody, and that is the most important thing. And you know that you have to take that fear and really fight against what we have to fight. And like what I always say this to everybody, to folks who have a trans identity: live fully and live visibly, and never forget to be happy among this pain and among all these attacks, because it is so important for all of us to remain together so we can continue building this safer world for us and for the new generations of trans immigrant folks who will be safe. So that is it. Thank you so much for this space.
Yes, gracias, Victoria. And also just, shout out to all of our powerful trans Latinx leaders, all of our powerful trans migrant leaders. I am constantly in awe of y'all's power, and so grateful to be someone who knows of so much of the work that has gone into campaigns like End Trans Detention and JOTAS versus ICE. Just so proud of that continued work that has been going on for over a decade. So if you don't know or have the tea on the huge fight from the trans migrant community, tap into it, because these are some of our fiercest warriors, honey. So we are going to have one more conversation. We are getting our amazing conversation partner teed up. But I want to take a second and just thank our amazing host organizations for this event. We have Advocates for Trans Equality, A4TE. We have Equality Federation, and shout out to all of the different parts of Equality Federation. We know it is huge and sprawling and doing so much work across the US. Shout out to Family Equality, GLAAD, Human Rights Campaign, Lambda Legal, the National LGBTQ Task Force, and Transgender Law Center, TLC. And thank you to the TLC fam for tapping me for this event. I want to make sure that we remember that we've heard from so many corners of our movement tonight. And I was joking earlier, but not really, about Marie being in Oklahoma, but we've heard from folks in Oklahoma. We've heard from folks in Maine. We just heard from a powerful leader, Victoria, in San Diego, California. We've heard from Arizona. We've heard from the Dakotas. We've heard from all over this country. And we know that our community is even bigger than that. So just want to continue to remind our people that there are more people with us and fighting alongside us than against us. All right. So we are also going to thank our different leaders from different generations. We have had elders, we've had the youth, we've had contemporaries to somebody on this call and conversation. So thank you all for showing up. And I think we're still teeing up our next person. So I'm gonna just let you get into the mug. I put on a little bit for you, not too much. We kept it light. We ain't gotta do too much. We're gonna be visible regardless. We know that. I'm also curious how many folks we have watching tonight, because we had about 400 or so. Okay, we'll get an update soon. I think Tori Cooper is here.
I am here.
Okay, here we go. So we are going to have a heart-to-heart with a sister who has been in this work for quite a minute. I'm from Georgia. You have roots in Georgia, and your work has transformed Georgia. I'm going to tee you up a little bit. So you are a health and equity consultant. You are an educator, an author, and the director of community engagement at HRC's Trans Justice Initiative. But wait, you also were recently honored as one of the most influential LGBTQ leaders by Out Georgia. So give it up for that in the chat. Welcome, Tori.
Thank
I
you
wanna
so much,
ask
Roxanne. Thank you.
First, what's on your heart today for TDOV?
So the very first thing that's on my heart is I really want to say how absolutely proud I am of you. You are such a shining example. I'm 55 years old, honey. I'll be 55 in a few weeks. You're such a shining example to folks who are coming behind you, folks who are walking beside you, and folks who are older than you. Thank you for everything that you do and how you show up in the world. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. That was on my heart.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. I mean, I see everything that I do, everything that any of us do. We're just a bridge between the folks that came before us and the folks coming after us. I know that you believe that to your core. What do you feel in this moment is very crucial for folks to remember in this fight?
So I really want folks to understand. So there's a lot of stuff coming from all kinds of different angles, and it's rough out here, right? We will acknowledge that, we will feel it, because when we feel it, that's the only way that we can heal it. With that being said, I want to remind you all that as trans people, as Black people, as people of color, however you navigate the world, we've been through this before. We have. Our 4 our ancestors, our transcestors have been through stuff like this before. We will get through it. And I think it's always important to remember that. It won't be easy. It won't always look the same and it won't always feel the same, but we'll get through this. And truth and light must always win. And on this day and every other day, trans people, we really are the truth and we really are the light.
So beautiful. See, you've done this a million times. You just get right in there and pull at our heartstrings. Thank you so much. Also, just what else would you tell to folks who are just getting into this fight, who may be new and see the powerful work that you've been doing, the way that you have laid a foundation? What are some tips for them to kind of stay sustained in this fight?
So number one is hydrate. Make sure you're drinking your water. I say that jokingly, but I also mean that because it's part of self-care. You know, an empty pitcher doesn't have any water to pour. And so you always have to make sure that you're taking care of yourself in some way. And if the least you can do is drink water, then that's good. In addition to that, I also encourage people to pace themselves. There are many, many fires that we have to put out. Many. You can't do it all alone. No one can. There are some things that each of us is really, 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 really good at. Find those things and do them with intention and do them often and continue to do them as best as you can. Show somebody else how to do it. And that's how we put out all these little fires and keep them from becoming just the world just being on fire.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Tori, for hopping in here. I know we only have a few more minutes on this call with you, but this conversation that everyone is consuming. So do you have a final word just to kind of sign off for our featured presentation tonight?
So I like to remind people that love is an action, but it's also a thing. Love is something that you give, but it's also something that you do. And so for each and every one of you, I want you to remember that I love you, even if I don't know you. I absolutely love you. I love you because we're part of the same family. The part of the same big dysfunctional family. Dysfunctional in a traditional sense, but functional in the sense that we know each other and we share a certain kinship and we know what's best for us, even when other people don't.
Thank you. Yes. And Tori Cooper is just a phenomenal leader. Get into her work, get into her legacy. And I think you're the perfect person to sign off for us tonight because you're someone who's worked between different movements throughout your career. You've worked in HIV advocacy. You've worked obviously in the LGBTQ plus realm, and you've built up an expertise in so many different spaces. And so you've been the glue. And I think that's one of the things that folks have to remember is we have to figure out our own way to be the glue between different corners of this movement. So tonight, figure out how to be the glue between our Indigenous leaders who are fighting for sovereignty and a beloved home. Figure out how to fight and be the glue between our intersex leaders who are reminding us how expansive the fight for bodily autonomy is. Figure out how to be the glue between our electeds and policymakers and our grassroots organizers on the ground. Figure out how to be the glue between our youth leaders and our elders who continue to pave the way. Be the glue between our folks who are doing this work in every corner of this nation, whether it is Maine, whether it is Oklahoma, as I said, down in the South, in the Pacific Northwest, in Hawaii, in Alaska, in Puerto Rico, in every place across this nation, we have all got to continue to fight for trans and gender liberation. Figure out how to be the glue between our Latinx fam, our Asian Pacific Islander fam, our Black fam. I already shouted our Indigenous fam out, but I'm gonna shout out our Indigenous fam again. And so many others as well, our Latinx fam and our migrant fam from so many different corners of this globe. So thank you all for tuning in tonight. We are going to continue this love fest in our community as we navigate these turbulent times. We heard from visionaries, healers, organizers, and so many more. And we know that this fight for trans liberation, for intersex liberation, gender expansive liberation, non-binary liberation, just gender liberation overall, it's not a trend. This is a timeless thing that we have been fighting for, and we will continue. We will organize, we will protect each other, and we will continue to build worlds where we aren't just seen, but that we can thrive in. So we have some links to sign off for you to stay in this fight with us. We've shared an acts.glad.org link. We want you to plug into the orgs that you heard about and from tonight. And remember that we have to continue this fight to collective liberation because nobody's going to get us there. We have to get ourselves there. Thank you.